From the West Coast, the East Coast, and deep in the heart of Texas, it's the Geek at Arms podcast with Bryan, Mike, and James.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Geek at Arms podcast, a podcast about three guys who share a lot of geeky hobbies and also a love for the Lord our God. I'm James, and hanging out with me, as always, are my buds, Mike and Bryan. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good.
I'm faring pretty well.
Glad to hear it. No love for your co-host, apparently.
Oh, and how are you, James?
How are you, James?
Well,
a little less love for the co-host, Mike.
It's all right. It's what I expect from him. I'm doing all right. I'm having a bit of an interesting day. Got up, fed the kids, let the dog outside, and there was a spaceship on my yard.
A spaceship?
Yeah,
Well,
not just any spaceship. It was a time ship, and so I really need to ask you guys a question. In the last episode, how many times did we mention the Retro Rewind podcast?
Oh, shoot. We said Retro Rewind 3 times, didn't we?
Did we?
Yeah.
I think we did.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do that. It's like Beetlejuice.
So just by saying Retro Rewind podcast 3 times.
That was the third thing. Whoa. That'll do it.
Whoa. Where? Last thing I remember, we were going in a black hole. Paul, did you fix that?
That was a kick.
Oh, wait. Hey, Bryan, Mike, and James, what are you guys doing here?
Hey, what do you mean? What are we doing here? This is our podcast now. What are you guys doing here?
Oh. Well, you're welcome for us dropping you off at your home.
You're absolutely right, guys. Paul, Francisco, Thank you for the ride. And
of course,
may I say, welcome to Geek at Arms.
Whoa.
Yes.
Some nice digs you have here. I like this. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Of
Thank you
course.
so much for inviting us.
Absolute pleasure.
I should
absolutely.
say summoning us.
It is a pleasure to have you guys on the show. It was the least we could do for you, so courteously having us on yours. And while we figure out the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey of it all, well, first off, tell us who you guys are and tell us about your podcast, as if anyone who listens to ours doesn't already know.
All right, I'll go first. I'm pauljpowers.com, and I'll let Francisco take the rest.
I am not a website. My name is Francisco Ruiz, and me and Paul and a rotating guest, or sometimes in the case of Geek at Arms, 3 guests, we host the Retro Rewind podcast, where we take a look at movies and games that are 15 years or older and talk about the things we liked, don't like, and whether or not they're still worth revisiting today.
Excellent. So, as is custom with our show, any guest we have, we let them have first shot at Geek Out. So, Francisco, Paul, what have you guys been geeking out to recently?
Well, first of all, I'd like to do a correction from your previous episode. Somebody mentioned, while covering Superman 3, you mentioned that there was no good thing about Superman 3. And I just got to say you're wrong, sir. There are at least 2 good things about Superman 3. One is that classics.
And Christopher Reeve.
Okay. Yes, exactly. Clark Kent versus Superman. That whole battle, that is excellent. That scene right there, I think, is fantastic. Other people can disagree. But also the plot. That plot of like the compute, not like, the computer is like trying to beat Superman. No, but to use a computer software to basically steal little bits of money from a company has been copied so many times since then.
Okay, so it's Office Space the movie with guest star Christopher Reeve. I mean, that doesn't make it a good thing.
Stole from this.
Yeah,
I would watch that film.
So there's at least 2 good things about Superman 3. So, moving on.
You know what? Here's the thing, though. That fight now is now available on YouTube. And a 5-minute scene does not a good movie make. But anyway, my opinion only.
All right.
So please continue.
Hey, I love that film. I haven't seen it, and I just felt like somebody needed to have your back, Paul.
And if you want to find out more about Superman 3, go all the way back to Retro Rewind Podcast's very first episode where we cover more. Anyway, and check out our most recent episode to capture all our reviews on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Kahn. So something that I've been geeking out lately, kinda, is have you guys I know some of you watch anime. Have you seen ReZero? Have you talked about that show ReZero?
No.
It's been on my radar at least, but I haven't had a chance to check it out yet.
Okay, this is actually like a couple years old. At least season 1 came out a few years ago. This last year they released a director's cut, and season 2 is actually in the middle. It's almost in the middle. There's like 10 episodes available right now. Crunchyroll is a good place to find it. I'm not going to go into like spoilers or anything like this, but it's one of the better anime series that I've seen. So if you like anime and if you are familiar with video games, that would help. But I recommend checking it out, at least the first episode, see if you like it. So put that on your list. Make sure it's on your radar. And then the only other thing... I've been doing all these binge watching shows, like you guys covered the Umbrella Academy. I've been doing all these things. When I'm not binge watching a show, my wife and I are watching the Goldbergs. It's been out a while. I think like season 8 is coming out soon. Like
it's been on that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But we're only like through season 2 because we watch. This is I know this is hard to believe, but this is an actual episodic series, not a serialized series. So we take it at leisure and just watch one episode whenever in between. So it's, if you like the 80s, there's some nice flashbacks, callbacks to it. Check it out. So that's what I've been geeking out. What's been new on my tubes lately.
Awesome. For me, speaking of the 80s, I just started watching Stranger Things, which I know has been out for several years now.
Yes, we love that one on this show.
Yeah, so I'm in the middle of season 3 right now, so don't spoil me to any of it, but really, I'm enjoying a lot of it. But but it doesn't come close to my like crush on Cobra Kai, which is so good. There's these shows or movies that it's like, I feel like the filmmakers like know me because they made this like for me or something. And
that's cool.
Cobra Kai is one of those shows. For a baseline, Scott Pilgrim versus the World and Inception are 2 of the movies that would apply that for me. So really enjoying Stranger Things and Cobra Kai.
I was trying to figure out how Cobra Kai was a combination of those 2 things. No. My brain was going spoing.
Black hole physics. So those are 2 things I'm watching, and then a game. Exactly. A game that I started playing. That I used to play back in high school, which is interesting because we talked about how in like films like Star Trek or what have you, the ships always seem to like come to face off at the sides. There's no like 3-dimensional play. So a game that I used to enjoy and recently got the remaster of is a game called Homeworld, where you essentially have this fleet, and you're every sort of mission, you take the fleet that you have into the next mission and either lose that or build up more, and you're perpetually trying to like grow your fleet without like getting destroyed. But in that, you can move in the whole 3-dimensional space, which is really interesting for this real-time strategy game, where you can like position your fighters like on the z-axis way up high, and your frigates on the z-axis way down low, and like pinch or attack the enemies coming at you, or to the sides or what have you. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's beautiful, the remaster of it. So those are the things I'm geeking out about.
We love the original trio. Who wants to go next?
Well, I'm first on the list, so I guess I'll go. I have been, as I mentioned in the past, I've been playing a lot of Destiny with my friends Yolanda and Christian. And Yoli decided to start streaming on Twitch. And so figuring, since my voice is going to be on there, I'm going to be like exposed to the Twitch ecosystem, I might as well look into that and start doing it myself. So I've also started streaming.
Dude, you are blowing my mind right now.
I know, right?
Not only are you playing Destiny, but I need a moment.
Well, most of what I'm streaming is actually Magic Arena.
Okay, that I believe.
I've seen your Magic streams, or that you've streamed Magic. I haven't seen Destiny, but okay.
Destiny usually happens pretty irregularly in the evenings. It depends on when all 3 of us our schedules mesh together and we can play together. And even when we are all three playing together, we don't always stream. But whenever we're doing the Rise of Iron story stuff, we'll stream then. If you decide to follow me, just a content warning, Yolanda's got a little bit of a potty mouth, so if you're sensitive to language, maybe give the Destiny streams a pass.
Oh, speaking of potty mouth, I was recommending the ReZero. That has a little bit of potty mouth in that, and a little bit of violence, and a little bit. I would say it's for teens and older, but
yeah,
no thanks.
Definitely Stranger Things and Cobra Kai are teen or older as well.
Yeah.
Homeworld though, that's good for anyone.
Anyway, I'm Midgard 77. That's Midgard with 2 A's in it, because I can no longer get my preferred handle of Midgard Swimmer thanks to Final Fantasy.
Oh.
Yeah. About 15 years ago. Yeah, the name got too popular because they named a monster after it. So if I'm not like on a service first thing, I can't get my username anymore. And I've also occasionally started streaming Factorio, which is a factory building game. It's kind of like a top-down 2D Minecraft. It's probably really boring to watch.
You build a factory? Is that like
you build a factory? Yeah. Okay. I'm not familiar with Pipe Dream, but you start with like just one little miner, and then you use the miner to get ore, and you turn the ore into more miners and assemblers and so forth, and you've got
sounds like child labor.
I know,
conveyor belts. Yeah.
It's not miner.
I was going to make that joke. I'm just glad that somebody beat me to the punch.
So that's what I've been geeking out to lately.
I guess I'll go next. And what I've been checking out lately is an anime called Brand New Animal, or BNA. It's a new anime, but one of the things that's really interesting about it is that it's drawn and animated very much like the style of the 80s and early 90s anime. But it's except it's still crisp, it's still clean. Mm-hmm. It's like taking the older style and bringing it into a contemporary viewing audience with contemporary methods.
Oh, interesting. I'll check that out.
And it's, the premise is really interesting, and that it's the idea that there are these humanoid anthropomorphic animals that have been living in human society. So people, but they can transform into, say, a rhino person or a fox person. And it deals with some of the tensions that have existed between humans and what they call beastmen. And it's not an analog for American race relations issues, but it does tie into some concepts of prejudice and race and segregation. And the series starts with one person who is trying desperately to escape to a sanctuary city that is built just for beastmen. And she's trying to figure out new abilities and trying to figure out who she is, because as far as she was aware, she was always a human. And all of a sudden she became a tanuki person. And so she can't transform back into a human, so she can't pass as human. And so she's trying to figure out this whole society that she didn't know existed, or didn't know it in those terms. And it's interesting because there's a lot of parallels to Disney's Zootopia, where there's animals having potential superpowered frenzy, and how do we quote unquote treat that problem medically. So I would also say that this is for teens. There's some language and violence, but it was fine for my 13 and 15-year-old, but probably not for James's little ones.
Yeah, you bring up Zootopia, and I feel like I would think the same thing when watching this. Is if all the animals are, and this is specifically Zootopia, if all the animals are aware and conscious beings, what are the carnivores eating?
They're eating you, James. They're eating you. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, so there's wild humans just roaming the plains. Synthetic protein. Yeah. Soy business is huge in Zootopia.
Yes. Soylent Green. Yeah. Oh, that was so wrong. I'm so glad
This
you're
poor
here.
rabbit just runs out of a building. It's us. It's people.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what they ate, but I would imagine they ate animals since they're beastmen, not animals. So I don't know.
I thought that was the whole thing. That, and I mean, I haven't seen all of Zootopia. I've seen like the last 20 minutes or so. Is that when they get frenzied, then they're eating each other, and that's why they're trying not to. But maybe I'm misremembering.
I mean, this is the problem with any sort of anthropomorphized issue. When you look at it too closely, then things start to break down. But,
Yeah, what do the Thundercats eat? Are they eating each other? Come on.
they're eating kibble, Paul. They're eating kibble.
In the theme song, Thundercats are on the move. Thundercats are loose. That's a warning. It means they're out for blood. They're hungry. Get inside.
I mean, at least in Narnia, they kind of dealt with it like, oh, wait, you ate a talking beast? Oh, no, that's cannibalism.
Uncool.
Yeah. All right, and that'll about wrap it up for me.
Okay, I will finish it out then. So I've been continuing to watch Star Trek Lower Decks. Been continuing to enjoy it. If you guys don't have a CBS All Access Pass, I don't know if it's worth it just for this one show, but I've also been enjoying Star Trek Discovery, and with more seasons of that and more Star Trek shows on the way, at the moment, it's worth it. Star Trek Lower Decks is kind of scratching that Futurama itch that I didn't realize that I had until I started watching it. Still funny. I mean, so many Easter eggs are dropped every episode that it just reminds you the people who wrote this are gigantic Star Trek fans, and you just kind of you wish you could hang out with them and make suggestions for the show. In addition to that, I've been trying a new video game out lately. It's not new, but it's new to me. I downloaded Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And if that sounds like a mouthful, it's because it is, because there are so many Tom Clancy video games out there right now. And
are there?
Yeah, the one after this one was Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakdance 3D Jazzercise.
So does this one star Alec Baldwin, Harrison Ford, Ben Affleck, or Chris Pine, or
They're
John
all
Krasinski?
available in the DLC. That's the weird thing.
That's amazing.
Change skins mid-game.
Is that also available in the zombie dance game? Because Chris Pine as a dancing zombie is something I need in my life.
You got to pay extra for that one.
Yeah, it's a third-person tactical shooter. It takes place on a incredibly large island with several smaller islands around it. So I was very surprised at the scope of the game. But it's got a lot going for it. The reason I got it is because it's a game that I kind of view also as social time. I had some friends on Xbox Live who were playing it, and there have been games in the past that I bought because, hey, my friends are playing it. They're going to keep playing it for a while. Plus, it was on sale for like $10. So, yep, that price is right. And honestly, the whole reason I got into playing Destiny was because friends of mine were playing it, and we played it together for a year. So it was a great time to talk, chat with them, those who live far away. And I read that earlier in the year, they had a special event, as games do now, and this one was a Terminator special event. And not a Terminator theme one where something like a robot comes and occupies that. No, actual Terminators begin appearing on the island. Apparently, in the future, Cyberdyne decides that somebody on the island needs to be targeted for termination, and they begin sending Terminators back. And there's a whole storyline that goes along with it, weapons and more, and it's fantastic. It is worth the price of the game alone.
That's wild. When the Terminators pop in, does it go from PvP to co-op, or is it that's all up to you, or how does that affect the play of the game?
You can go just single player, or you can invite friends who are also playing at the same time to join you, and you play together. Like the first time a Terminator shows up in this special side story, this side mission, one thing I like about the game is that since it is based on like more real life ballistics and physics, there's no you're shooting a guy until his health goes down and then he dies. You're using actual guns and bullets, and so usually a couple of shots will do it, or one in the head, he's dead. The Terminator shows up and he comes slow walking through a doorway, and he's not Arnold, but he's very Arnold-esque. He's got the leather jacket and everything, holding a machine gun in one hand and a pistol with a scope in the other.
I thought you were going to say a box of roses, but you know.
You start shooting him, nothing happens. You shoot him some more, nothing happens. You dump a couple of magazines into him, and you actually start getting scared because nothing's happening. He's still coming at you, and bits of flesh start getting picked away until you start seeing the silver and the red eyes underneath.
Nice.
And when I say it takes a lot to kill them, it takes a lot to kill them in this game.
Can you pick up a hydraulic press as equipment, or?
Funny enough, it fits in your holster along with your pistol.
Amazing.
So this takes place on an island. Is there a volcano on the island? Any lava
Right,
that's nearby?
Oh yeah.
Just
Don't
draw them
you?
into that.
Don't I wish? Because the first time I faced one, I was like, okay, I'm gonna run,
Yeah.
and I hightailed it.
Did you know it was a Terminator the first time you met it? Like, or was it a surprise that,
know-
oh my gosh, why is this guy not going down?
I was suspicious at first, but then the music confirmed it for me. The
nice.
dun, 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 dun.
Nice.
Plus, the character kept asking. This conversation prompt kept coming up. Says, "Are you Sarah Connor?"
No, I'm zombie. What'd you say?
I'm zombie Chris Pine.
Dang it, I think we've got a sequel right here.
I'm sorry to hijack, but I have to know I feel like there's almost no one that could take up and be as good a Terminator as Arnold Schwarzenegger. But can you guys think of any actors that would make for a good or a good Terminator?
Ooh, this is our
know it'd
pop
be-
quiz.
You know it'd
This
be
is
fun.
impromptu pop quiz. Love it.
Okay.
Aren't they always impromptu?
Shh, Brian, don't spoil it.
The closest that comes to my mind is The Rock, but that would be so
Yeah.
cool to see a Terminator Rock versus a Terminator.
Oh, that would be. Oh gosh.
Ooh.
yes.
What about the guy who plays Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy, Batista?
Oh yeah.
Dave Bautista?
I could see that.
I could see him doing it. So, have you guys seen the trailer for the new Dune movie that just came out?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yes.
I haven't watched it yet. No.
Okay, in the Dune series, there is a character called the Beast,
Beast Raban.
and
So
his
Kelsey
reputation
Grammer is
but Batista, this big imposing figure plays him, and I'm like, okay, that's a good use for Batista, and because he's this giant hulking figure who just leaves destruction in his wake, and yeah, I could see Batista pulling off a Terminator vibe.
nice. Okay.
It's funny. I was gonna go with Batista too. I don't know why, but there it was. James, you're in my head again. What did I say about deactivating that chip?
You said exactly what I programmed you to say.
Gosh dang it again.
It would be good up until like a raccoon jumps on his shoulder, like, Drax, cut it out, we've got to go. And he would say, quiet, I'm being invisible.
Okay, so Paul, what's your pick for the Terminator replacement?
I said The Rock.
Oh, that's
Rock,
right.
Yeah.
So we got The
Bryan say
Rock,
though?
Batista times 2. Who's left?
I didn't weigh in, and I'm having a hard time coming up with anybody.
Go for Anthony
because-
Daniels.
Anthony Daniels. I'm thinking David Harbour as he played Hellboy. Because he was surprisingly impressive physique.
Was that the old Hellboy or the new Hellboy? I've only seen the old
The
one.
new one from
Hellboy.
Stranger Things.
Oh,
Yeah, they got the sheriff from Stranger Things.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Hopper.
Yeah, when they announced him as Hellboy, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But then I saw the pictures. I'm like, oh, okay, well, sure.
All right. There you go. Cool. Thanks for letting me
Francisco,
give that
you-
pop quiz.
you-
I'm not off the hook.
Yeah, you're going to answer your own question?
I give the tests. I don't take them. I think it'd be interesting to see Sylvester Stallone as a Terminator. I think that just because there's always that sort of like pseudo rivalry between them. I think it'd be cool to see.
Yeah.
So
as a
Francisco
Terminator as well.
comes from the Last Action Hero universe.
Ooh, that's where I was gonna go with that because that was seated in there.
Yeah.
Is some of his best work.
And I'm honestly surprised no one said John Cena because they're trying to put him in those kind of
Oh,
roles.
well, that's true, huh?
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
He's a bit too like I want to say. I think this is even a term in wrestling of a baby face. Like he's just too much of a likable character. I don't know.
I'm quickly looking up who John Cena is.
See, that's the other problem is recognition.
Well, he's been in like the what was it, the Transformers movie with the
Bumblebee?
Beetle, Bumblebee, and he's been in several films, as kind of following the same path that The Rock started. He had these like minor roles.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
eventually taken on larger and larger ones. But
Yeah, but
I don't know.
I think that The Rock is more. I don't know how John Cena can do the comical side of things like Dwayne Johnson can.
He doesn't have the star power, definitely. But
What is the name of the actress who played Cara Dune? Because she could do the comedic part of it, and she's pretty physically imposing. So that'd be an interesting take, I think.
In The Mandalorian?
Yeah.
oh yes,
Oh, that would be good. Yeah.
Gina Carano.
That's the one.
Yes.
I mean, especially because she has the physical, like she knows how to fight. And I think that she would be an interesting take. And she had...
All right, I changed my answer to Gina. That's excellent.
Now we're all imagining, okay, yeah, I really want to see that Terminator movie now.
So Norm picked Benedict Cumberbatch. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, if you want a Terminator that looks like he's about to starve to death, sure.
Although I don't know.
Do we really want a Terminator Sherlock Holmes?
No. No.
Now that you say it like that, I
would like a
that
Terminator
film.
Doctor Strange.
Well, I mean, do we really want to see a Sherlock Holmes who also is going to kill people indiscriminately and just walk through bodies like it's nothing?
Yes.
Yes.
Shall we begin?
Well, in that case,
Ooh, that was good.
it's a good thing that you guys are here because today we're doing a special edition of the Film Club, and we're with the guys from Retro Rewind. We're going to be reviewing Star Trek Into Darkness. There are 13 movies in the Star Trek universe, and it's interesting that this is our 13th Film Club episode on Geek and Arms.
Oh,
And
wow.
for those who are superstitious of such patterns and ominous numbers, get over it. We're moving on.
There are 13 disciples, so why not?
There you
Exactly.
go.
Right, there you go. You know, I think that we really do have to put a plug in here because this is kind of a two-part episode. We have just finished recording with the Retro Rewind folks, and if they wanted to check out our review of The Wrath of Kahn, what episode number is that going to be when it gets posted?
That's going to be at retrorewindpodcast.com/209.
And because
09.
Into Darkness came out in 2013, that's way outside of their reviewing parameters. In fact, even mentioning the movie in passing opened up a black hole that brought them here.
Yeah, it's weird. Can't believe it.
So because this is kind of a two-part thing, if you want to check out our review of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Kahn, and we're going to kind of discuss its parallel film from 2013, Into Darkness. So
it is going to come up.
yeah. And right. Well, I mean, I guess that gets us into the question of why this film? Why are we taking the special time aside to talk about Into Darkness? We don't know, do we? Okay. Other
Because
than
it's a Star Trek film. Why not?
well, that in itself is good enough. I mean, my thought was, well, when Francisco and Paul said, do you want to do this two-parter? We're like, yes, there's only one answer to that. Yes, we'll do this.
Essentially, I'm someone who enjoys synergy a lot. I know that's kind of a very like TV executive type term, but I like it when.
What are we at, 2005 boardroom?
Whatever.
Yes.
James.
No, we're Magic players. We talk about synergy all the time.
That's a good point. But I usually have to tap mana to get that.
Okay, now let me come out of the swamp here and say that I think it is just a cool idea since I knew Wrath of Kahn or Into Darkness took a lot of, let's say, license or inspiration from Wrath of Kahn. For us to cover Wrath of Kahn on Retro Rewind, I thought it made a lot of sense to cover Into Darkness on your guys' show if you're willing, and very gracious of you guys to be like, yeah, let's talk about that. That'd be awesome. So thank you guys so much for giving me and Paul a chance to talk about a movie that's not 15 years or older.
Well, to be honest, it wasn't that much of a hard sell. It was like, you guys want to watch some Star Trek? Yeah, we do want to watch some Star Trek.
We do that. Yeah, we do that here. Well, and I think that there's something that is interesting in this film in itself because it's really meant to be in parallel with The Wrath of Kahn. The film really relies heavily on fans being able to at least distantly remember, or at least be distantly familiar with Star Trek II: The Wrath of Kahn. It employs similar characters, relies on basic knowledge of the backgrounds established in the TV episode Space Seed, and mirrors a lot of the classic scenes in that original movie.
I think it actually works though standalone though, because I went into this movie not having seen Wrath of Kahn. I'm one of those few people that hadn't seen it. I'd seen, I think at the point I started the Kelvin Star Trek universe, I'd only ever seen Star Trek 4 and Star Trek 6 of the original series cast. I'd seen some of the Next Generation films as well, but I saw the reboot, the 2009 Star Trek, and I still was able to come away with a lot, but I would say, and we might get into this later, I came away with a lot more having seen Wrath of Kahn and then seen Into Darkness.
So how was that first viewing of the film? Did it feel like it was, I mean, did it feel like it made sense? Did it function well as a standalone film in your experience with it?
Yeah, for me it did. It seemed to make sense. They had established the characters in the 2009 version with Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, and Carl Urban. Carl Urban, oh, such a good McCoy. Okay,
he's fantastic as McCoy.
Sorry to geek out there. That's
what we do.
Previous
That's
section.
what we do.
Yes.
But so they established who these characters were, what their motivations were, all that. So it's definitely easy just going into the next adventure with them. And I was able to follow what was going on just fine. I think if you have no familiarity with Star Trek at all, it would have been odd. You probably would have wondered, why are they doing such a thing? I did have a weird quandary scene at this time again about the whole starting scene with the volcano and the people, the tribal people. But no, I would say, to answer your question, Mike, it was totally, it made sense, and it was easy to follow for someone like myself. So if you are me out there listening, you'll be able to pick up on it.
Well, it sounds like then they had a great deal of success with the film then, and making it both standalone and it be, I guess you could say, being a conversation with its previous incarnation.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. And they
That's
didn't
a fine line they walked, and they did it.
Yeah. And it was funny because they didn't advertise the film as a remake with Khan. Instead, they made it a reveal moment in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even remember J.J. Abrams saying, no, it's not Khan, or something like that. And
yeah,
I
remember that too.
Yeah.
He said that a lot, and I know I didn't believe him because it was pretty obvious where he was going. And
right, yes.
He made too big a deal out of it, I think.
Yeah. See, he knew it was going to be Khan. We knew it was going to be Khan. Abrams knew that. We knew that Abrams knew that. Abrams knew that we knew. We're a very knowledgeable fan base. I'm sorry. You have to forgive me. I will quote the movie The Lion in Winter every chance I get.
Oh, I'm familiar with that movie. Go ahead.
Talk later.
I'm also thinking 15
years old. You should watch it.
Okay.
I recommend that for the retro rewind.
I don't know what you were referring to, so it felt like I clearly cannot choose the poison in front of you, and I clearly cannot choose the cup in front of me.
See, that one I get. Okay.
See, well, people were drawing the parallels between the two when it was announced. The 2009 reimaging was so successful, we knew there was going to be another one. And as they were shooting it, and they cast Benedict Cumberbatch. That guy, anyway. Yeah,
Butternut Crinkle Fries. Yeah.
Yes, Butternut Crinkle Fries. Yes, they cast him as the villain, and people were already drawing the comparisons. Is this one going to be like Star Trek II: The Wrath of Kahn? Because that one was so important. It was so well done. It's so many people's favorite Star Trek movie. And
but Benedict looks nothing like Ricardo. I mean, he doesn't have the big pecs. He doesn't have the long hair, that outrageous accent. I mean, they're totally different.
Well, I mean, he has an outrageous English accent. I mean, that's enough to make most American viewers are like, okay, yeah, I'm totally in on this. And his pecs have yet to be seen on screen. The Benedict Cumberbatch shower scene was cut from the film.
Oh.
I'm not even making that up.
Did I miss out?
Kurt's like, I'm sorry. Can you please put your shirt back on? I'm sorry, Captain. I can't do that.
What's funny is I didn't know that this was going to be Wrath of Kahn when I went into the film the very first time I saw it.
It's Into Darkness.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I had no idea that Kahn was going to be a character. I thought that it was an idea that they had played with early on. Well, should we toy with Wrath of Kahn? Now we're gonna do this completely different, not at all Kahn thing oriented called Into Darkness. And then when he had that reveal moment, my name is Kahn. I'm like, I guess we are doing this.
He turned a 1-syllable name into like a 5-syllable word with that.
Mike, I would have loved to have had that moment, because leading up to it, I heard J.J. Abrams say, no, it's not Kahn. And I was one of those fools that believed him. But unfortunately, I am a reader of the internet. And like about a week before it came out, it was all over the internet that, oh, yes, this is Kahn. And I'm like, no, that would have been such a great reveal. Thanks, internet.
That's frustrating. Yeah, right.
See, I was kind of, I won't say upset, but I was disappointed that the villain ended up being Kahn, because...
I can see that.
I'm not saying that it lessened the original any, but I mean, this is a new imaging. It's a new crew. They already established in the first one. It's a new timeline, new everything.
Right.
If they wanted to base it on Wrath of Kahn, that'd have been great. If it had been like one of Kahn's, one of the other 72, like his best friend, like his lieutenant, I think from the Wrath of Kahn, the only other member of his people that gets named is his buddy Joaquin, I think the name was, the blonde-haired guy who keeps asking him questions and questioning his orders. If it had been that guy, I think that would have been a better choice than Kahn himself, because it would have opened up the avenue for some different dramatic moments and a new character, but still based on that original idea.
It goes back, and why the Kelvin universe is so flawed is that because at one point in time itself skews into another timeline, but anything that happens before that, where the timeline skewed off, it should be the same. And Kahn is still Ricardo in 1990s when he takes off and somehow transforms into Cumberbatch. It doesn't make sense.
Those cryo tubes, they really mess you up, man. They just bleach the skin.
And the Kelvin universe has problems with that in other areas, so it's just one of those glaring flaws to me. But anyway,
I think exactly what you're saying,
it's
Paul.
not like Star Trek isn't full of those to begin with. So
no,
it just makes it worse.
I think what you guys are saying, though,
compound the error.
Makes a lot of sense, that if it had been his second in command, they could have even done a whole thing where, Khan's cryo chamber got destroyed, or a meteor hit it because we're in the skewed timeline, and so he then woke up, and it was a different person, in which you had a sense of what he would do and what he'd go after, because they're all like Superman, hungry power people.
Yeah.
But he's going to have a different skill set, maybe a different way of going about, which would have been led to more of an interesting sort of, I guess, film, because you don't know what to expect necessarily.
I think it would have made the other beginning scene, besides the one on the volcano and the planet and saving that indigenous race, the scene of Khan offering to save the little girl. It would have led to the believability of that, because the Khan that we meet in Space Seed and Wrath of Kahn, that's not something he would, even if it's justify his ends. It's a means to an end. I don't see him having even a shred of humanity for anyone.
I don't know.
He had proposed headcanon here. What if this guy was just pretending to be Khan because Admiral Marcus didn't know the difference?
Oh, so he conned us.
My real name is Genghis Khan.
My real name is Steve. and you are, I'm very important.
No one would surrender to the Dread Pirate Steve. Anyway,
in the 90s, I was known as Steve Jobs.
No. The thing I found interesting about that scene, though, is in the second viewing, I found that opening scene where he's talking to the guy about his daughter completely believable, because I thought that he would do anything to manipulate somebody into their ends.
Yeah,
that is true. That is absolutely true, Mike. I will see to that.
And we'll talk a little bit about some of my observations on that scene a little bit a little bit later.
But
I
just
just
to
thought
back
that
that up,
whole
Mike,
child scene could have been removed, and the film would have been just as good.
probably.
But honestly,
he
I
did
enjoyed that scene because I thought that between the camera work and the music, it was a beautiful scene. It probably could have been removed and the movie would have been fine, but I still think it was a scene that was very well done. And watching it again as a dad of a little girl, I'm like, I'm not crying at this. This scene is not going to mess me up.
Yeah. I just was wondering, like, okay, what's the point of all this? And it just kind of slowed it for me. It's like, this is not Star Trek.
Yeah, they spent
This
an
is-
awful long time on a
This is
throwaway
a soap
character.
opera built into the middle of a Star Trek commercial or movie.
I do find it interesting that concept that they use, like, okay, we're going to have this event so that we get all of these people into this room. That's what they get out of this, is getting them into this room. Came from one of the seasons from Doctor Who as well. And so given that premise is shared there, I really wanted David Tennant to show up at that guy's desk like, Mickey, you are better than this. We'll find another way.
But if it's David Tennant's doctor, he would have just said, I'm sorry, Mickey, I'm so sorry. Fixed point in time.
Oh, no. Okay. All right.
And then why was...
Cumberbatch a
Go.
doctor? He would make a great doctor, I think.
Oh, that's an even better question that I was going to ask. I don't know.
Stunned silence. I get it.
Yeah.
Because
don't
then everyone
think they
would have
could
made
afford
the
him.
Yeah. Do we call him
Oh.
Sherlock or we call him Doctor or Dr. Sherlock?
It's strange, isn't it?
It is strange.
But who am I to judge?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, all right. So, is there anything in the film craft that we want to talk about in this
Lens
in this
flares. No, sorry.
Actually, I have a story about lens flares on this movie specifically.
Oh, let's do it.
I have a friend who was working at the stereo conversion company that was working on this, and having seen
That's
the
like
first,
making it to 3D, right, Brian?
right, yeah, taking the 2D movie and making it 3D movie,
Right.
and it's way cheaper these days to actually just convert a movie than to shoot it 3D to start with.
Huh.
As strange as that seems. But having seen the first one and knowing that JJ is really fond of lens flares, and actually having worked on Fringe, in which the lens flares were a problem, I asked him, so you're converting these movies, where do you put the lens flare? Is that like
In the foreground.
behind the screen or like right, because the lens flare takes place inside the lens. So it should be like on your eyeball.
Right.
And he just said, "Shut up, Brian."
He's like, we saved $3 million by not doing as much lens flares in this movie. So just accept it.
Well, apparently his job was to rotoscope the lens flares.
Ooh.
So he'd
How's
spent
your friend
hundreds
doing?
and hundreds of hours.
Yeah, is he okay?
Yeah, when did he check
I
into
haven't
rehab,
talked
just
to
out of
him
curiosity?
since then, actually.
We might want to make a wellness check on him.
No, actually, he's now a VFX supervisor. Oh, no, lead compositor for Imaginary Forces, I think.
Oh, very cool.
So he's doing very well.
Let's see. For the film craft of it, yeah, I'm someone who I feel like this film was shot really nicely. I'm not someone who gets distracted by the lens flares. They do start to become obvious in Star Trek and some of other J.J. Abrams' other properties, but I just thought it was shot really well. I liked when they chose to use Steadicam versus tracking shots and all the 9 yards there. I love the way they do warp speed for
with
in
the
the Kelvin
Steadicam.
universe. What? Do they?
I said with the steady. Yeah, well, as it stretches and takes off and then the camera shakes.
They've got a guy out there
In a space suit and a
vacuum
camera.
with a steady-
Yeah. Like,
This isn't going to hurt, right? No, Steve, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
yeah.
No, just
Don't worry about the particles. What?
How warping looks, all that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I agree. That was a very cool effect.
And I think tilting, like a lot of the action scenes, they were tilting. They even tilted the whole Enterprise. And they started running around on its side, just like
Yes,
2001: A Space Odyssey, but did it much better because it was faster and quicker.
I was
But
gonna say,
yeah,
like
I thought
Inception, but yeah.
I was thinking Inception
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
Well, I was going sorry. I'm of the Retro Rewind podcast. We only review movies 15 years older. Inception's not there yet.
Sorry, got 5 years. Excuse me.
Yeah. But the overall production quality, I think, is very good. It's actually something that still holds up today in today's movies. It could fit right in.
Oh, yeah.
10 years later. Yeah.
It's amazing. Go ahead, Mike.
Something that you ask on your podcast a lot is, how did you watch this? I mean, did you watch this in Super HD? And was that where your experience came from?
I watched on Blu-ray on this one.
Yeah, for me, it was Blu-ray 720p.
Oh, sorry. Mine was Blu-ray 1080p.
And so all of that looks super clean.
UHD and the high, what's the word?
HDR?
HDR, high dynamic range.
Yeah, nice.
It's gorgeous.
It's a beautiful movie.
Cool.
It's amazing the effects difference between these new movies and the old ones. But then the Wrath of Kahn was made for 20-something million. It might have been even 12 million. And this one was made for 185 million.
Oh my gosh. That's like half the money the Wrath of Kahn made.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about the differences between the models and CG on your show. And that's another place where that really makes a difference, because once you've built a physical model, you can shoot it all day and it doesn't really cost much more.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was about to
CG,
say,
it's going to cost you per second.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Yeah. And I was about to say to that, there's something about as gorgeous as the ship looked, all the ships look in the Kelvinverse, there's something almost too glossy about them that you don't get with the models in the old Star Trek films. And I'm not saying one's better or worse. I'm just saying there's
different style.
It may just be the style of it. Yeah. And it looks very sleek.
Too slick, too clean, too Apple Store-ish.
Yes, I was just about to say that.
Yes.
Yeah. I liked the first one. The first one we see in the 2009 Star Trek, the USS Kelvin. I liked the look of that. It had a kind of more of a feel of that old Star Trek dynamic to it.
Is that the one Thor dies on?
Yes, that's the one that Thor dies on.
Okay.
See, what's interesting is I really, I mean, again, this is all subjective experience of the film. I really loved the redesign of the exterior of the Enterprise. Like, I know that it was different from the original, and I don't particularly care that it differs from the original. Just it really made it feel like the old Enterprise for today, like with our aesthetic. Our aesthetic sensibilities. I loved the look of the ship, and if it looked a little too shiny, maybe it just hadn't dried off from when it was submerged under the ocean. I don't know. I'm just pitching that out there.
It just got a wash. So yeah, there you go.
I was about to say that everything would be shinier because it doesn't oxidize because it's out there in space, but then they did spend the first part of the movie under the water, so that doesn't really hold water.
Did you feel the same about the interior of the ship, Mike? You said the exterior. I'm curious, what did you or any of you guys feel about the interior? Like, personally, I felt like it was a little too bright and glassy and Apple Store white, essentially.
There are parts of the interior I really liked. The only ones I don't are when we get to engineering and it looks like a industrial natural gas factory.
See, I felt like engineering actually looked the most authentic.
Yeah. Now, they finally showed us the warp core. I thought that looked fantastic.
Oh, okay.
It was like NASA on steroids.
Yes.
I've got this a little bit later as we're talking about some of the comparisons between the old, the new, and the different decades. But I mean,
we're getting ahead of ourselves again.
That's fine. No, that's what we do here. That's what we do. That's what happens. But in brief, I would say that the bridge and the shots of the interior was, it was a different experience from previous Treks, but I didn't find it jarring or anything of that sort.
Well, and as I said, I was watching it in HDR, and my TV is really bright. So you go on the bridge, and everything is white, and there's shining lights in your face, and it actually literally hurt my eyes at times because that scene was so bright.
Though, to be honest, we don't get a really great look at most of the corridors of the new Enterprise because everyone's running. Everyone's always running. No one walks or strolls in this movie.
It was the influences of the West Wing on Star Trek.
Oh, my God.
That might...
Is everyone just running in the White House in that show?
They basically ran their dialogue at twice speed while everyone was walking through the corridors quickly. they actually wrote more dialogue per minute than you're supposed to write, just so they could make everybody go through everything faster to make a high intensity environment.
Make everything look urgent.
Right.
I was going to say, that's why everyone is in such good shape in Into Darkness, because everyone's cardio levels are just so high.
Exactly.
And what is it in the Star Trek, the cartoon that's out right now? What did they get rid of? Yeah, Lower Decks. They got rid of the extra time so that everyone had to run everywhere.
Oh, yeah. They called it... oh, now I can't think of it.
The lift?
Oh, brain fart. No. They actually cut out like extra time in their schedule through the day so they couldn't complete all their functions without having to run everywhere. But anyway.
Was it called filler time or buffer time?
Something like buffer time. That was it. Buffer time.
It's a joke from like whenever Kirk would ask Scotty, it's like, Scotty, how long is this going to take? This is going to take 8 hours, sir. But instead he'd do it in 2, and that would make him look like a miracle worker. Well, the truth is, like, the command officers, the cap, they've been in like the higher rank for so long, they've forgotten how long it actually takes to fix stuff. So those of like, who are actually doing the work saying, oh yeah, this is going to take 2 days, but it really was only taking like 6 hours, and then they just chill out and slack off the rest of the time.
So in the cartoon series, the upper command finds out about it, and they eliminate buffer time, and so everyone's always running everywhere. So that's why in this movie they eliminated buffer time, and everyone's running.
Okay.
This is so early in their careers that Scotty hasn't invented the Scotty factor yet.
That's right. Yes.
See, when you said the animated series, I was going back to the 1970s. Like, okay, what do they do? And
when there was
cat girls.
They both had cat girls. Yeah.
I am so glad that she's back then. Well,
that's not the same one. Yeah,
I know. Well, what happened to the 3-armed lieutenant? I liked that guy. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Something else that I found surprising. I enjoyed the Wrath of Khan's music, like we mentioned before, but this one I think I enjoyed even more. The score to this.
Oh, yeah, I definitely love how they took the original theme and then added to it and just made it more contemporary. I think it's a great amalgam of the two and a great update.
Michael, Bryan, help me with his last name because I'm going to butcher it.
I don't know how it's pronounced.
He did the score for both the 2009 Star Trek and this one, and I really enjoyed them as well. I thought they did a great job. I mean, when the music just flares the first time we see the Enterprise in space, it just conveys this majestic feeling.
Yeah, totally.
And it's got a lot of darker tones into it, more ominous, that fits well with the darker alternate reality in which Vulcan's been destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always forget that that's a thing.
I actually like the explanation when Khan is saying that, because in the original series it's Kirk in the Enterprise that finds the Botany Bay, but in this one he says the destruction of Vulcan made Starfleet be more aggressive in their exploration, and that's why he was found early. I'm like, okay, you know what? I buy that. That actually makes sense.
Yeah, that does. They did the time element right on that part. Yeah.
Oh, that's why he looks like Benedict Cumberbatch, because if he had been in that cryo tube for 3 more years for taking a Kirk to find him, he would have aged a little more. He would, skin would have gotten darker. He would have picked up the accent, and his pecs just would have been banging.
Oh, thank you for explaining that. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
It's interesting you brought up the themes, though, Paul.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about some of the thematic comparisons of Into Darkness and Wrath of Kahn? One of the things that I kind of noticed that they both did, which was have it, what I kind of privately to myself, and I guess now publicly to the internet, have a James Bond opening. Like there's a little short narrative that kind of sets up the pace and the tone and some ideas for the movie. And then once that 10 minute shtick is over, then we get on to the quote unquote real movie.
Mm-hmm. I felt like it was very James Bond like as well. I had that same thought, Mike.
Well, I was thinking MacGyver.
I didn't get the comparison between James Bond, but I certainly like the action opening sequences a lot better than boring white text on a black background for the credits.
Yeah, I don't remember the credits. I guess there's a reason for that. But anyway.
Well, it's at the end now with the zooming planets at the end.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Recall, how did Wrath of Kahn start? Was it? Oh, is the Kobayashi Maru, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it started with blue text on a black background.
There you go.
Yeah, I think if we're comparing, it's definitely. I think one is cool and hip and actiony. The other is amazing how it sets up a whole paradigm that like lasts through all of Star Trek now, the Kobayashi Maru, which no one's going to be talking about that one planet with a volcano and the tribal people. That's not going to set any sort of precedent for future Star Treks. But the Kobayashi Maru
nobody knew.
So.
It does set the precedent of Kirk's character at the time, though.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. Yeah, but that's just character step. I'm talking about something that affects the lore in totality. I feel like that's is interesting how this older movie really did that. Whereas this newer movie, I mean, I had forgotten about that whole sequence, but even not having seen Wrath of Kahn, I knew about the Kobayashi Maru because it's so embedded in pop culture. So I think that's a testament to how it's not all about the sizzle and glitz. That's not a long legacy does not that make necessarily.
I think as a testament to what you're saying here, Francisco, is short story time. My wife gets this brand new cat that comes into our house, and I do what I do with everything. I start poking fun. Like it is like there is there's no escaping this. Like and sometimes my wife will look at me like, why are you teasing me? I'm like, because it's what I do. I mean, do you want it to stop? It's like, no, you're fine, and then move on. But at this point, she looks at me after several weeks, and it says, Mike, what kind of cat could I have gotten that you wouldn't make fun of? And I said, Kaja, this is your very own Kobayashi Maru, Kaja. It's your Kobayashi Maru. And the fact that is just a metaphor that exists in our brains is not going to come up. No, there's nothing in Into Darkness that's going to be that classic lasting moment. Although I don't know that any other Star Trek movie has really had that deep of an impact since. And maybe I'm wrong, but it's...
Well, I mean, I want to save the whales after 4, so...
well, I was a little bit older. I already wanted to save the whales when 4 came along. So
he was wanting to save the whales when it was cool.
Yeah, which means I'm old. Like, just old. But I think that it also, to that point of Star Trek II's opening and Star Trek 4 being what it was, the opening, I think, sets up the movie to let you know what kind of Star Trek you are watching. And in Wrath of Kahn, this is all about this dialogue of, okay, what do we do with these difficult situations? And it was very much like the 80s Trek. And this movie starts with the opening, and it is just running flat out from the beginning. And it sets the pace for the tone. It does tell you something about the emotional resonances of the characters, because Uhura is worried about Spock going down. I forgot that they were dating. But this opener let me know, where is this relationship sitting? And then he does the whole needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And Spock sets off the, I guess, the Vulcan in the volcano sets the device off.
Can I ask?
I did not pick up on that before.
Did he actually say the words, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few?
He did.
Okay,
he said
because honestly,
so.
I couldn't remember. Okay, when I was rewatching this movie, I had little kids running around, so I only heard about maybe a quarter of the actual dialogue.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, the Wrath of Kahn, it gets mentioned a couple of times and at very poignant moments. This time, I missed where he said it in the volcano, and it doesn't get said again. And so it had me wondering, like, well, the core concept is implied throughout the movie. I was just wondering, like, wow, it gets brought up so much in the original. I didn't know if they brought it up in the remake.
Yeah, I think it comes up in the volcano, and it comes up after we have the crispy Kirk getting irradiated.
That sounds like a delicious dessert. Crispy
Oh my
Kreme.
gosh.
I'm gonna get those at the
No.
donut store now.
Gosh, you'd think that they would have thought about this in the early 1980s when they just made cereals out of everything.
They actually did have a Star Trek cereal. It was before the 80s. I remember
wow.
calling, but
Oh, wow.
I bought a
it
box.
did not contain Crispy Kirk. Sorry.
Darn.
No, but you could. There was one where you could cut off your own Geordie visor from the back. I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
And then get into an argument who was eating C-3POs and cut out the C-3PO mask on the back of the box.
I also did that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so it isn't just my shame; it's all of us, or at least the two of us. Okay.
Yeah.
Two of you anyway.
But getting back to the movie, the first scene was so action packed that I think that's why I found the whole scene with the dying daughter boring. I'm like, okay, I'm in for the ride now. And I know a lot of people are like, okay, I need a breather, but not me. I'm like, we just got this party going. What's this? Come on.
I actually kind of liked the break because as much as there's like this
most people
actiony
do.
drive,
Yeah.
Most people do. I'm the odd one. I know.
no, it's not odd. It is your experience of the film. Just own it and just bring it on in. There we go. I mean, and so having like action pack, then bring it down for a minute. Action pack, bring it down. Lets me catch my breath a bit.
Yeah, because when compared to the Wrath of Kahn, which Wrath of Kahn compared to the motion picture, it runs. It's much faster pace.
Yes. Even though it's longer.
But the Wrath of Kahn crawls in comparison to Into Darkness. I mean, this movie may have clocked in at like 2 hours and 14 minutes, but there's just so much going on with it. It goes by at a breakneck speed.
Yes.
Yeah. I also think that, you were saying earlier, Paul, that, well, why don't we just drop this whole thing with the daughter?
Right.
And for the record, the name of the man who had the daughter was Thomas Harewood. I looked it up.
Okay, the record shows that his name is Thomas Harewood.
Not Mickey. Definitely not Mickey. Anyway, the thing that I found interesting about that is that we just come right off of this. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and Spock is willing to sacrifice himself, but Harewood is putting the needs of the one above the needs of the many. And so,
trying to get intellectual on us now, huh?
I think it might actually be deliberate because otherwise,
I
you could
believe
cut
it.
this out.
Yeah.
And so it's showing somebody who is emotionally desperate, somebody who's tied up with his feelings about his daughter and is heartbroken, and he's a father that would do anything, even put the needs of so many under the needs of his daughter. So I think that it has a place in this film, even though it doesn't really fit the pacing.
Yeah.
Can I say what would have been?
I don't know.
I guess I don't understand why he didn't just get out of his bargain or take Khan's blood or whatever. He heals his daughter and then just don't go and blow up the thing. I mean, I could see if he wants to do some sort of self-sacrifice, like he goes and kills himself for some reason. I don't know, but if you're endangering other people's lives, I mean, I guess it's driving the point home that you mentioned, Mike, that it's just to set up how this is in contrast to the self-sacrifice that Spock and Kirk have. But just from sort of a pragmatic, realist point of view, I guess it's my own point of view. Is like, why I'm not going to kill a bunch of people just to save my kid. I would try to save
you go
them,
into
and then-
hiding after.
Exactly. You go into hiding.
Yeah, I think if this was a next gen episode, this would be a wonderful moral exploration of how
wrapped up in 42 minutes, and
right.
Well, I have a postulation on that. This guy has access to the Section 31?
yes,
Anyway, whatever it is, underneath the archive. So possibly he had access to being able to find out who Khan was. And so maybe he was just freaking terrified that he wouldn't be able to get away and this guy was going to come and not only kill his daughter, but his wife too.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Because
I feel like
he
if
would.
he knew that much information, he would also know the link to the main admiral guy. I forget his name.
Marcus?
Marcus, thank you. Marcus Aurelius. I think that he would know that connection, and he could go seek Marcus for help, or some, take it up the chain. I don't know. I'm sure it may not work. I'm just saying it bothered me. I'm just saying personally, it bothered me that he did that, though. I guess that's like
I had the same thought. Yeah.
Okay.
It seems to happen very quickly, though. Like he gets the vial with Khan's blood, and in that same cool little container is the ring, the death ring, the ring bomb. You could call it a ring pop, even. And he gets it. The blood, gets transfused into his daughter. He instantly sees his daughter's doing better. And then it seems like the next scene is him heading off to Section 31. He's off to work.
Yeah.
And so he may not have had time to do anything else.
And Khan was clearly shadowing him that whole time.
Because, he saw Khan right before he was about to go in.
Yeah. It made me wonder why Khan just didn't throw a grenade in the library and skip all that.
Right. I almost feel like
it would have been so easy.
If you want to have the breakneck pace continue that Paul wants, and you don't care about setting up a contrast, and it seems like you could go from the volcano exploding or not exploding to an actual explosion of a building, and you're like, there's mayhem everywhere, you don't really know what's going on, and then you see some mystery person, maybe you just see their eye, maybe you just see Benedict's eyes or something, but they're looking on, and we as an audience know that they're the ones who did it, and then the rest of the movie just proceeds as normal. You just go to the council and you find out, oh, this happened here to draw us here. It just seems like you could have kept going.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel
thank
like
you for proving my point.
You're welcome.
I'm just hung up on the fact that nobody has hung a lantern on the fact that Francisco said contrast. But anyway, moving on.
I'm losing all those puns. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're just setting them up, and then we just put them on. Yeah.
You're emphasizing it slightly more every time, I noticed.
So, Trek has changed quite a lot since the 1960s. What makes this film a Trek that is essential of the 2010s era?
The year it came out.
10 points for Gryffindor.
Correct.
Paramount wanted more money.
You're not wrong.
We're into the age now of the touch screens, of the cell phones, all the information and TV shows and media and information at your fingertips at a moment's notice. And so obviously there was going to have to be a change up in the technology, and not just in a retro cool kind of way, but they had to make it interesting and relevant to the audiences of today. Because, I mean, just as much as the 70s and 80s movies, these could not just be made for Star Trek fans. If they wanted to have any chance of reviving the franchise, of making more movies and TV shows, they had to hit as wide an audience as they could.
Is that why they're carrying around iPads in this movie? Because, I mean, this is supposed to be in the future, but that doesn't seem to have progressed as much as Tribbles.
That was interesting. I mean, they talk about data pads in Next Gen. They have something really clunky in the 1960s, which I'm sure looked really sleek. But it was interesting that I didn't even notice the iPads, because they just had them and it looked like a tablet, and he just set it aside.
Yeah, I didn't either. Yeah.
But you'd think that maybe should have been maybe a clear piece of plastic that he could just scroll on and do, oh no, you set that down and you'll never find it. Okay, never mind.
You got to put little orange corners on it.
I lose more tablets this way.
Yeah,
Where is that tablet? Well, you just set the other one down right on top of it.
I think
Where's that one?
Oh, no. I think that we've mentioned
Siri,
the pacing.
Find my tablet.
100 start blinking.
I think we've talked about how the pacing was much different, and that's
way more actiony.
I think that if we had tried to make something of the 1980s pacing, I think that it would have bombed at the box office. I think that we just want to engage movies differently these days. I mean, maybe not we specifically, because we as moviegoers in this podcast enjoy a swath from the 1980s and a couple of them from the 1920s. but I think that the average moviegoer would not have been engaged in like a shot for shot remake of the Wrath of Kahn, because they would want something that would get their blood pounding and then give them a break.
I'm going to have to disagree. I don't want to spoil our episode that we reviewed Wrath of Kahn, but I'm just going to say I disagree with that assessment. But
fair enough.
I could be wrong.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think anyone would really want a shot-for-shot remake of a previous movie. That's one of the reasons I'm so against these Disney live-action remakes. I think they're just...
I am right there with you.
I mean, a pox on culture is probably a bit too strong, but I think... Now, here's where I feel like... I'm not sure where you were going with this, Paul, but I think they changed it enough to make it its own story, and that's important.
Sure.
I almost feel like the way we were taking it before with like one of Khan's side or not henchman, but his lieutenant would have been even vastly more interesting. But I think that you wouldn't want a shot for shot remake. I don't think that would have worked.
Yeah, and I don't mean a shot for shot, but I just meant the pacing. I think the pacing is fine from the 80s for now. And that's my opinion.
And because it is this new universe, we had the opportunities to tell those old. Just because they're old doesn't mean the stories are bad. They're still well done. They're still relevant, because so much of Star Trek was written as a commentary for what was going on in its age. They still hold meaning, but to tell them in a brand new way, I think I look at a lot of Into Darkness as a lost opportunity, as a missed opportunity.
How so? Because they didn't what? Yeah.
Not just because we brought back Khan, and nothing against Benedict Cumberbatch. He's a fantastic actor.
It's not his
really
missing shower scene, then.
No, it's not. Well, it's not just that. It's not just that. I do have to put that in there. But I feel like that there were parts of this script which were written by a 13-year-old.
Oh yeah,
you mean the part with the turnaround? Yeah,
right. Oh my gosh, that's so unnecessary.
The fact that we get that scene with Mrs. Marcus, or with Miss Marcus, and also
Dr. Marcus, she earned
You're
it.
absolutely right. I apologize.
Wow.
That gratuitous scene, and it is gratuitous. There's no other word for it. The fact that Khan's blood can heal you and resurrect you, and thanks to Khan's, and not just his blood, but all their blood, we've now conquered death in the grave.
Yes.
The fact that one of the main points of the Wrath of Kahn was the starship captained by Khan, the Reliant, versus the Enterprise captained by Kirk. And it became like not just the ships were close to equal, so it became a match of intelligence, wits, and cunning. And in this one, the quote-unquote bad guy ship is huge. It's black. It's got phasers and torpedoes and big, huge Star Wars cannons. Yeah. And there's cutouts. And it looks like it was designed by a 14-year-old. And it's jet black for stealth. And you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah. That in the modern storytelling, the way that we make something more threatening is bigger and more guns. Mm-hmm. And
as opposed
the way
to...
that we...
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Smaller
bring it on
and less
home.
guns.
No, but it's more of your intellect and what you bring to the table in terms of your cunning that seemed to be more what was on the menu for 80s fare.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
exactly.
I will say one thing where I think this movie brings it up to another level in the writing is just before that, before you have the two ships sparring against each other, you have the Captain Kirk and the Admiral sparring of what Khan has told Captain Kirk is like, oh, they're trying to use us, and then the Admiral is saying no, he's trying to use you, and then there's that dilemma, like which is true, and I thought they handled that really well. Like
that was a nice scene. That was,
yeah.
And Kirk chose to, nope, we're warping out of here. I'm figuring this one out on my own.
And I think another point to add to your point, Paul, is that the way that Spock solved the problem that he had. With he's under the gun. He has to deliver the hostages, or they'll all be obliterated.
Right.
He outwits Khan, and I think that not to spoil our retro rewind episode, but I think that picks up on a point that Bryan made earlier, is that instead of this being a let's duke this out fight, that it was intellect versus intellect to gain the upper hand. And I think that this film did that extremely well in that particular regard.
To a point, it did.
And then they lost
wind
it
up
at
with
the
this fist fight.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then then it was like, oh, so we're watching Space Seed again.
Well, the
Yeah,
first part of that is we get Spock's Vulcan side, and then we get Spock's human side.
And I will say, at least in this case,
Which obviously the human side is the brutal, barbaric, boxer.
right?
Of course, can be
At
anything.
least in
that
this
was his-
case,
the pointy pugilist.
what I was trying to say is, at least in this case, it didn't come down to Spock being able to beat Khan on his own.
That's true. Yes.
Uhura's intervention was what actually turned the tide of that battle. So that was a little less unsatisfying, but still.
But I definitely would have loved to have had it left at them defeating the ship, escaping, didn't they, just the whole idea of Scotty being in there and them getting aboard to take out Marcus. I think that, I just felt like that. And if Khan had died in that ship, that would have been a bit more of a satisfying ending. If we said this was really fast paced, breakneck the whole way through, but I feel like they're trying to, and this happens a lot with modern cinema or 2010 cinema, is that you're just like, okay, we have a climax. Okay, we need climax number 2 now. We gotta keep going.
Yeah.
It's like, we're good. It's satisfying. You don't have to beat the horse.
Time and space means nothing in these movies because, Scotty, I need you there now. He's literally there in the next scene. He's in Jupiter in an hour. And yes, I realize it's the future, but they go from Klingon space to half a mile from Earth in 15 minutes. And no one ever says, they just say, go to warp. I'm like, wow, warp is really fast in these new movies.
But only going one direction. It takes them like a day to get to Kronos and about 3 minutes to get back.
Yeah. Because convenience.
Don't tell anyone that.
Scotty, I need
always
warp
say
15 now.
The Enterprise moves at the speed of plot.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I think it's also interesting that this film, when you had the climax on climax on climax, I was kind of exhausted by the time we got to the fist fight.
Yes.
I was ready for it to
agree.
be over.
I was right there with Kirk. I'm like, I feel exhausted. I feel like I just got brought back from the dead. That was tiring.
Exactly.
Although I did love Carl Urban's line, "Oh, please, you were only dead for 5 minutes."
That did seem pretty essentially Scotty to me.
You mean
I think you mean
Not
McCoy-ish,
McCoy-ish.
but yeah.
What, okay, look, if I've gone with Sarah Connolly and I've gone with Dr. Hammer, I'm gonna do it. I may as well be consistent in not keeping things straight.
There you go.
Thank you
It's
for
a
being
trope
comfortable enough to be yourself in front of us.
Exactly.
Okay.
But he was also the only one of us who remembered Thomas Harewood's name. So
That's true.
I put it in the notes for a reason.
So speaking of having the warp speed of whatever they need to move the scene along, and the fact that they went from the scene where the standoff between the two ships and they both get disabled and the short fight and they both lose power. That was right by the moon. That's what it looks like. But then they start getting toward the Earth real fast.
Oh yeah, all of a sudden they're next
why
to the
didn't they
Earth.
crash into the moon?
Yeah. Why didn't they crash to the moon? And even if it's the Earth's gravity that's pulling them toward the Earth, doesn't it usually take us a few days to get to the moon?
I've just been terrified that the moon is going to crash into the Earth after this, just drop like a rock.
Well, but here's the thing, though. They were going at warp speed. Wouldn't they still maintain inertia even after dropping out of warp? They'd still be going at a very fast speed toward their destination.
But wouldn't the moon have been left far behind them, though?
No, they don't have that in Star Trek. When you stop, you just stop. Because
that's a good point. That has been
if your
shown in several episodes.
Come to a halt.
It's like when Captain Picard says "dead stop." Okay, we're still going to be cruising along at warp 3 when we let
they have
the water stop us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But I would think that those would be out of commission in this case. But I don't know.
Wait.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know why.
No, it's not a great point. It is a terrible point, but it is still something that happens in Star Trek. It happens in all of our space sci-fi.
If you're in the middle of nowhere in space and there's not planets around for several days, how do you know you're at a full stop? There's nothing to compare it to.
All of a sudden you like fly by a comet, like, whoa, dude, is that how fast I'm going?
You
Dude.
send that
that
guy
the
out there
comet?
with the camera who shot the Enterprise going to war from behind.
Okay.
You stick
With
him
the
back out
Steadicam,
there.
yeah.
Steadicam. He's, okay, Steve, and go. "Ah!"
All right. When this film came out and its predecessor came out, there was a lot of discussion among the fans. Some loved it and others indicated that it didn't feel like Trek to them. So acknowledging that this is a subjective response, and how does this film strike you? Does it seem like Trek?
Well, there are a couple of things that Star Trek really evokes in me. The things that I like about it. First and foremost, the entertaining interpersonal stuff, the banter between the command staff, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, Scotty, that we mentioned in Retro Rewind. Data learning how to interact with his crewmates. Cisco dealing with being both a religious figure and superior officer to Kira, that kind of stuff. And I think Into Darkness really satisfies me here, that foundation of the Kirk, McCoy, Spock relationship. And then there's an extra layer of it when they're unable to agree with one another and they're actually genuinely mad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of what some people didn't like, is they don't like to see mom and dad fight. And when Kirk and Spock are at odds, that makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah. Or how about Spock and Uhura?
I actually really liked that Uhura Spock dynamic, because
Same.
this is the first time that we've seen two people working out a relationship between a human and Vulcan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see on screen we had humans and Vulcans marrying in Star Trek, but I don't think that we ever had to see them work out this emotional, non-emotional relationship dynamic before.
Yeah.
And never did we see them trying to resolve interpersonal conflict. So I actually thought that was a bonus.
Well,
And-
there was
and
some of that in Enterprise. Not that a lot of people give Enterprise a lot of credence, but I can
And-
always keep wondering about Pon Farr.
Yeah.
I super don't wonder about that. I just
I think that one got addressed pretty well in the original series episode where Spock almost kills Kirk. And I think that's all we need to know.
I
Right.
just watched that.
All right. The second element I like is that regular puzzle posed by the Prime Directive, trying to resolve the conflict between our ethics and our morals. What do we do when the rules say we should do one thing, but that's clearly the wrong thing?
That's good.
And again, Into Darkness kind of delivered on that, at least in the opening scene with the volcano. And then the speculative fiction part, where if we've got genetically engineered superhumans among us, how do we deal with that? What are the ramifications of having networked minds like the Borg? And while Trek often handles things like that clumsily, it does still attempt them. And in that regard, I think that Into Darkness didn't really do much. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a very fine action movie, but it wasn't really a great science fiction movie.
Yeah, one of the things that when people talk about Star Trek is that Star Trek usually is this, it's a sci-fi show, but it's, especially in the original series, and even I should say all the series, they deal with issues. Each episode is about an issue that's probably going on in modern times that they handle with a slightly different view through the scientific sci-fi lens. And so this issue of like genetic human beings and let's just say, for the example, taking the issue of what if blood really can bring people back to life, what do you do with that? I think this movie, like you said, doesn't really feel Star Trek, where it attacks an issue and explores its different outcomes per se. But on the other hand, it does feel like a Star Trek movie because it's a really fun action movie with our fun, loving characters that we enjoy so much. So I would say that for people who are looking for a hidden message behind it all, which Star Trek usually does, This is very light, if there at all. But if you're looking for fun characters, then yes.
Well, Paul has adequately drawn my conclusion. So, Francisco, what were you trying to say?
Oh, well, I was going to say something similar to that. I guess I'm sort of between you, Bryan, and Paul, where I feel like in terms of characters, this definitely feels like Trek, especially if you're talking about original series Trek, because I feel like Chris Pine does a great job as Kirk, and Carl Urban does a great job as Bones, and Zachary Quinto does a great job as Spock, and the whole cast of that's brought from the original series into this one. I feel like everyone does a great job in those roles, and they feel like those original series characters. So from a character standpoint, yes, this definitely feels like Trek to me. From a story standpoint, yeah, like what Paul was just saying, I've come to expect, I think I have the majority of my Star Trek experience with Next Generation, and where they did have a lot of sort of moral, sort of morality tales is probably a bit too simplistic, but they were looking at an issue and sort of like, here's this issue that we're taking care of in space, but now it gives you a better sense of how to think about it on your own. And this seemed to be more concerned with, I mean, there was sort of superhumans, but that whole theme wasn't really played into. Then there was sort of the military industrial complex, and it's trying to satisfy its own needs versus the needs of the Starfleet, and that was touched on, but they didn't really explore it that much. It was just like them bad, us good, boom, and it didn't go deeper than that. So, in terms of the thematic elements of this from a story concept, I feel like it wasn't very Trek. So, and then special effects, definitely Trek. It felt like Trek. It felt like a much more updated version of Trek. Yeah. So. Mostly, I guess I would say, but not completely.
I would say that to me, it felt like new Trek, like Neo Trek. The older Trek movies, like the original series movies, they had the history and the weight of the original series behind them. And even the Next Generation movies with Picard and that crew, they had 7 seasons that let you all know who these people were, what this universe was like, how they handled things, what their morals, what their ethics were, and more. And we just get thrust into these new characters and into this new world. And because we're getting them in the form of summer action movies, summer blockbuster movies. That's what they are. That's what they have to be. That's what the studio is aiming for them to be to make money. We only get a seasoning of what you would call classic Trek. We get the names, we get the characters, we get the terms and the descriptions of the universe. But when you get to like the nitty gritty, when you're looking for the weight of it all, I've found that in some regard that's a bit lacking. I did like, of the 3 new Star Trek movies that we've gotten, the 2009 one, Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond, I do think, and this is a personal opinion, I think Into Darkness is the weakest of the 3. Because the 2009 one, I loved it. I thought it did a wonderful job of re-imaging the universe, of showing us these new characters in a wonderful and original way, but treating it very serious. Loved young Kirk jumping out of a car because his mom's boyfriend is a jerk. I loved young Spock. I wish we had gotten a couple more young characters, but I understand the need for time. Actually, I saw this movie in 2009 in Denver, Colorado with Bryan.
No way.
Where we drove all the way across town to the wrong theater.
Oh, no.
But we still made it to the right theater in time. We just missed the credits. And we walked in for that opening scene of the USS Kelvin, the lightning storm in space, them being attacked, and Kirk being born all at the same time. And we were talking about opening scenes, like that opening little moment that kind of sets the tone for the movie. That took my breath away. I think that was the best opening scene of any movie that I've ever
You
seen.
were just out of breath from having to run to the theater.
I was yelling at my wife, "I'm getting the seats. You get the popcorn and the pop." and I also really enjoyed Star Trek Beyond. It established new characters, new situations without having to rely on anything of the old Trek. But Into Darkness, I think it makes it a little bit weaker, a little bit less like Trek, is because it is pulling from old Trek.
Yeah.
And that weight, that feeling of history just isn't there, because in the Wrath of Kahn, we know who Khan is. We know what he's capable of. We know these characters and how they've interacted with each other through all the seasons in the prior movies. In these new movies, while they do a good job of showing us the Kirk McCoy banter, the Spock Uhura relationship, which I also enjoyed that dynamic, we've been fed so little of it. And it just made me hungry for more. I would love to see these characters and this universe and this Enterprise in a TV show.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of its criticisms. And when it gets to Kirk's death scene, because we don't have a long history with these actors as these characters, it feels cheap to me. It feels like, they're just copying, and they
flipped it to add a little bit of novelty to it, but they're just copying Wrath of Kahn.
Yeah, so it doesn't have the weight for me.
That's weird, because I totally disagree on that. I feel like Kirk's death was actually a lot more significant.
Well, you're wrong, sir. Get out.
Well, I do. Here's the thing, though. I criticize it for pulling from Wrath of Kahn. I also recognize that it was a well-done scene.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like I can criticize it, but also acknowledge how good it is at the same time.
I thought it was but I don't know if I can separate the two.
It seems like maybe that scene might have had just a little bit more impact if it was suddenly the burden of command seemed to dawn on him, is that, I have been playing it fast and loose with people's lives, and now I've got to make a responsible command decision and do some of that sacrifices me.
Kirk's personal arc in that regard was kind of cut off.
See, I guess I kind of see that. It didn't seem like I can see what you guys are saying, that it didn't feel like he really got to the point of realizing that he can't just count on his luck. It would be nice if there's a bit more to foreshadow that this was a very real possibility, if that's what you guys mean. But I don't know, something about it. Maybe it's just Chris Pine's performance, but I definitely bought the emotional weight of it a lot more than I did.
It's his blue eyes.
I guess so. Yeah, those baby blues. I just I can't look away.
That being said, though, you talked earlier about the casting choices of this movie. I think they nailed every single one, and I have immensely enjoyed Chris Pine as Captain Kirk. I think he's knocked it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of will they, won't they about another Star Trek movie set in this Kelvin verse. I really hope they do, just because I have enjoyed the characters so much.
As long as it's not Tarantino.
I'm into that.
My only sort of I want that, but I don't want them to have to recast Chekhov, and I don't know how they continue without
they said
Chekhov
they would.
the actor.
Yeah.
So
did anybody else have?
He gets promoted to the Reliant, and they bring back that three-legged, three-armed guy from the animated series to take his spot.
A really hard time when Kirk told him to put on a red shirt.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh my gosh.
Is there not an assistant chief engineer? I mean,
right?
Well, what they should have done is when Kirk said, put on a red shirt, and he should have said, well, yes, Captain, but turn around.
Here's the thing about this new timeline, that's just the way they seem to promote people. Kirk went from a cadet.
You don't have to go through training or anything.
He went from cadet to captaining the starship in half an hour, and then he gets sent back to the academy, and then he gets promoted to first officer, and then they give Pike back the Enterprise. And so in this world, it makes perfect sense that, hey, Ensign, you're going from manning the con to my chief engineer. Congratulations. Go fix things.
Yeah.
We're at war, gentlemen. War's right here with the Klingon Empire. That's my RoboCop impersonation. Excuse me.
Oh my gosh! I just realized that Admiral.
Really? Oh, just now?
No, I'm just now realizing.
Wait, is he RoboCop?
He's RoboCop.
He's
I'm on the same pacing as you, Paul.
He's Buckaroo Banzai?
Yeah. Buckaroo Banzai, exactly.
Admiral Marcus is wow.
Yeah, For me, this whole question of does this feel like Trek, it's funny because I'm the one who raised the question, but I'm not 100% sure as to what it means to feel like Trek or not feel like Trek. Because to me, all these various iterations of Trek feel different from each other.
Yeah.
Like my favorite incarnation of Star Trek is Next Generation. I love it. And no, this does not feel like Next Generation to me.
Yeah.
But the original series doesn't feel like Next Generation either. And there are episodes of DS9 that I just skip because I'm like, no, I'm not going to the mirror universe again. I'm just not doing
amen
it.
to that.
But I mean, Star Trek has a lot of different flavors to it. And this incarnation is a lot less focused on the moral dilemmas of Next Gen. Like if this was Next Gen, we would have sat for the movie, or at least for a good 43 minutes on, well, what does this mean to be reliant on this military industrial complex? And should we use it, or should we do away with it, or should we give into it? Should we shackle it? What should we do with it? But for the sci-fi adventure aspects of this, I mean, I think Trek has room for a variety of these kinds of stories.
Oh, so you tricked us.
No, I did. Well, maybe I did. I wasn't meaning to, but it was, I mean, I think that what I think is there's enough room in Trek to have different kinds of stories. And if this feels like Trek for you, great. If it doesn't feel like Trek for you, then there's a reason why. And like, let's explore that. And, and then hope that, we can find more of those stories. Because I'm not going to lie. I was a little bit shocked when I saw Picard, because I'm like, finally, we're getting back to the universe that really felt like Trek to me. Like, oh, Picard is not Next
anymore.
Generation. No, that's not it. This is a 2020 Star Trek, not a 1980 Star Trek. Okay. And then I enjoyed Picard, even if it felt different to me.
It's less Next Generation and more Game of Trek.
Oh, gosh.
Well, gentlemen, did we have any final thoughts on Star Trek Into Darkness?
Many, many more thoughts, but none of them final.
Well, we'll save that for a different frontier.
Think of any.
It'll be our
Oh, gosh.
It'll be our ongoing mission to explore strange new plot twists and new dynamics to boldly go where every podcaster has gone before.
Nice. Well put, Mike. Well put.
And on that note, I think that will lead us to our zombie apocalypse plan of the week. Mike, how are we going to stave off the undead this time?
Oh, we are going with a desperate gambit. I think that what we need to do is practically carpet bomb the undead with SETI eels.
Ah.
Yeah, if you watch The Wrath of Kahn, those things that go inside and eat your brain? I mean...
The earworms.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what they're called?
Yeah. Well, if you want more information about them, you should go check out the latest episode of the Retro Rewind podcast.
Yes.
If you've heard of it.
Do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for anybody who raises objections that this sounds as dangerous to us as it does to them, we have one advantage that Khan did not. And that is...
You don't want to shoot the captain?
I mean, well... now maybe I do. He left Earth in 1996. He did not have ear pods. So if we just stick those in, the SETI, there's no room for SETI eels, and we're just cruising. So, while you have those in... just listen to more episodes of the Retro Rewind podcast and Geek at Arms. Hooray.
Sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
I can't lose.
Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for this episode. I want to thank everyone for listening in. I especially want to thank Paul J. Powers and Francisco from the Retro Rewind podcast for joining this episode. Gentlemen, this has been a blast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, and thanks for everyone for conveying their thoughts on this.
All right, before any more puns get warped our way, guys, where can we find you online?
PaulJPowers.com. You can find me, Paul J. Powers. I'm there, and all my social media links are there. And you can even find links to the Retro Rewind podcast.
What? Speaking of Retro Rewind podcast, you can find that at retrorewindpodcast.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Retro Rewind Pod. You can join our Facebook group, which is do a search for Retro Rewind Podcast and for Facebook groups. If you want to contact me personally, Francisco, you can find me on Instagram at FXRUIZX or on Twitter, FXRetro_.
And you can find us at geekatarms.com, at facebook.com/geekatarms. And Mike, what's our Twitter handle?
On Twitter, you can find us as Arms Geek.
And finally, from all of us here, we want to say, be safe, be blessed, and be geeky.
Thanks for listening to Geek at Arms. Music for this podcast was provided by Incompetech.com. For more, check us out at Facebook.com/Geek at Arms. Give us a like and maybe even subscribe to us on iTunes. That would be awesome.